My name is Lillian Galley, and I'm this year's Chief of Staff for Pre-Health Programming. I'd like to thank you all for attending the conference, as well as the volunteers and sponsors who support this event, especially the AAMC, who has made it available online throughout the globe. The questions I will ask our panelists were populated directly from our online survey that we had open for about 6 months, and Twitter responses from pre-medical students around the nation. If you would like to add any further questions, please use Facebook or Twitter with the hashtag UCDPHSA14, and we will do our best to address them. About halfway through, I'm going to go ahead and ask the questions first, and then we'll have the audience come up to these 2 microphones and get into a line, and you guys will have the opportunity to go ahead and ask your questions as well. So without further ado, I'd like to have our panelists introduce themselves and the institution that they represent, starting with Ms. Dunn. Sorry? Yeah.
I'm Kim Dunn with Campbell University's College of Osteopathic Medicine in Buies Creek, North Carolina.
My name is Chuck Vega. I'm a family physician and director of the Program of Medical Education for the Latino Community, or PRIME-LC, at University of California, Irvine.
My name is Monica Vela. I'm from the University of Chicago Pritzker School of Medicine. I'm the Associate Dean for Multicultural Affairs there.
I'm David Grier. I'm the Associate Dean for Student Admissions and Financial Aid, and I'm at Wake Forest University.
I'm Kurt Hansen from the University of Wisconsin. I'm a geriatrician, which means I see the elderly, and I'm also the Assistant Dean for Admissions at the University of Wisconsin.
Hi, I'm Rob Roswell. I am the Director of Recruitment and Retention in the Office of Diversity Affairs at NYU School of Medicine. I'm also a cardiologist by trade, so I take care of sicker people, older people, and hopefully not young people. But I'm looking forward to sort of the interaction from the group, so don't be afraid to sort of step up to the mic a little later on when we have the interactive session. I think that's a lot of fun.
I'm Joel Maurer. I'm the Assistant Dean for Admissions at the College of Human Medicine at Michigan State University. I initially trained as a family physician and transitioned into an OBGYN physician as well. So I'm also hold an appointment at our medical school in the OBGYN department.
Great, thank you so much. So let's go ahead and get started here. The first question that I'm going to take from the online forum, the questions that we collected. We're going to go ahead and we can start with you, Ms. Dunn. I've already earned a bachelor's degree, but need to take my pre-med courses before I can apply. Is it okay to take them at a community college?
Sorry. Yes, it is okay to take them at a community college. You'll want to look at the community college that you're attending. You'd also want to look at the, you might not want to take all of your classes at the community college level. You might want to take some at the university level, but it would be okay to take some of them at the community college level.
Anybody else, please feel free to input.
I would just add that you don't have to have your prerequisites done at the time of your application to the University of Wisconsin. You can complete them during the year that you're applying.
Great. Anybody else? All right. Sorry.
Actually, can I go? So I think it's a great question because it's a question of access, and so we certainly have a lot of students doing coursework at the community college level. At some point, you want to make sure that you demonstrate that you can take higher level courses in challenging environments too. So that is weighted into the decision. Now, if what you have available to you is community college and that's where you feel comfortable, that's great. Go for it and excel. On the other hand, though, I think all our admissions groups will look differently at the courses you take out of university. We look at the institution and the type of students you're practicing with, the type of professors you're learning from, in that calculus for admission as well.
All right, thank you.
Can I just I'll jump in as well. I 100% agree. I think, when you're when your files are being presented to the admissions committee, we definitely look at what schools you're coming from and the competitiveness of those schools. So if you're taking sort of your pre-med or your pre-med requisites at a community college, it is definitely important that you excel on your Mcat, because that is sort of standardized against the nation. So if you got an A at community college X, and you did very, very well on your Mcat, that tells the admissions committee that you truly are a very good student. So just keep that in mind.
All right. So this question will be for Dr. Hansen. What does medical school weigh more, a difficult major and minor with average GPA, or a single major with an exceptional GPA?
I encourage you to do well in whatever you do. Don't go for the average GPA, go for the exceptional GPA. At the University of Wisconsin, we do not weigh the major very heavily at all, and whether you're a double major, single major, will usually not be considered by the admissions committee. They want to see that you do well in upper level courses in whatever field you've chosen. Even if it's not even a science field, if you're majoring in literature, when you get to those 300, 400, 500, 600 level courses, you need to be doing well in them. Of course, in your prerequisites, if you're a non-science major, you have to do well in the prerequisites, of course, too. But doing well in upper level courses, regardless of your major, is the most important. As far as our admissions committee go, I've never seen them talk about the person's major. It's simply a non-issue.
I want to go ahead and emphasize that. I don't think the major matters. You must take your prerequisites, but do what you're passionate about, because guess what? Whatever it is that you're passionate about is what you're going to do best at. It's also going to feed into your diversity. If you decide to major in poli-sci or some other non-basic science major, that's something that you bring to the table that may be different than other students. And that's something that's going to feed the school and the class as a whole.
Any other input? Okay. So, Dr. Grier, the next question. What is your favorite question to ask at an interview?
Well, I don't interview anymore as the Dean of Admissions, but I had this question, so I guess it's safe to tell now since I don't interview. I give a scenario that says, okay, you've gotten into medical school, you know, wherever you wanted to go, but your undergraduate school wants you to stay another year, spend the first semester developing a course, and the second semester teaching that course, and you have resources, unlimited resources within reason, I guess. What would be that course, and how would you teach it? And the reason I asked that question was I want to get to their interests, you know, their passions, also sort of flush out if, you know, I've had people say, you know, I asked them, what's your favorite course? And they were a French major, go back to the major, and then they say, oh, organic chemistry. I'm like, well, maybe it was, but I doubt it. So, you know, and also I'm trying to get at the applicant's creativity as well. And then also it's sort of an odd question that puts people puts them on their toes.
This is a great question. We should all answer it. So my favorite to ask is, tell me about a difficult situation you've had to cope with or you've had in your life and how you coped with it. Really trying to get at what their coping mechanisms are and what their support system is.
I think it's an interesting question because at NYU School of Medicine, we don't get to ask the questions like that anymore because any school that you're interviewing at, you have to know the interview format. So NYU is one of the schools that use a new MMI, which is the multiple mini interviews. So they have a lot of situations, and you have, our school, we have about 10 of them, and you sort of, it's a script, and you sort of come into the room and you sort of talk with a faculty member about that situation outside of the room. Other schools may have a hybrid where you have the traditional sort of interview format and combined with the MMI format. So whichever school you're interviewing at, you have to make sure that you're well versed with what kind of interview you're going to be getting, because I wish I could ask a similar question, but when we interview, it's really about the situation that's posted outside of your room when you come to interview at NYU.
At Michigan State, we're a school that uses a blended version of interviewing. So we have both a a traditional 30-minute interview. It's with a medical student, though, okay? And the other part of the interview process is with an MMI that we started a few years ago. As far as the traditional interview goes, I think the favorite question that we like to ask is what is it about our mission statement that resonates with you and why? Okay. My experience, at least at my school, is that sometimes admissions committees really love to hear what you love about them or love about their school, okay? And I think, in the end, there's a lot of us that are from out of state here, and we realize that we're speaking to a lot of candidates from the West Coast, especially California. But I think one of the pieces of advice I've been giving people out here all day today is you got to tell us why. Why us over somebody else, or or why is it that you chose to apply to our medical school? And I think that's regardless of where it is you end up applying. And schools, they want to know why it is that you're interested in them. And so, from that perspective, I think that's our favorite question to really inquire about is, why us?
Yes, I would second that, since we get a little over 8,000 applications and probably 1,500 applications from California alone. And so why are you applying to a medical school in a small city in North Carolina? What's your connection? What if you? And another thing, sort of along the same lines, if you come to the interview and you don't know a whole lot about the school, and this goes for any place, that doesn't look too good.
So at Pritzker, we have a very traditional interview style. You'll have 3 interviews, one with a medical student, one with an administrator, and one with a faculty member. And that's because we really think that everybody at the school is important. And we want to make sure that we have 3 different perspectives on each student. One of my favorite questions, actually, which is a real stumper, when you come in and sit down, I'm going to ask, tell me more about yourself. And I get either a blank stare, or a, didn't you read my application? Or a, I don't like to talk about myself. None of those are acceptable answers. I'm really looking for a student who is able to relate to other people, easy to have a conversation with, easy to make smile, with great interpersonal skills. Because guess what? If you've been asked to interview at our school, it's because we recognize how difficult the path has been to get to that interview. We recognize that you've worked hard to get your great Mcats and Gpas, and we're over it. We know that you are ready for an academically challenging environment, and now we want to know, how will you do with a patient in the room? And how easy is it for you to elicit what the reason for the patient being in the room, right? So we want to hear you talk. That's one of my favorite questions. My other favorite question is, once you become a physician, who or what will you advocate for? Because it's really important that you recognize that all physicians, whether they mean to or not, are advocates for somebody or something. It may be just for the person that happens to be walking into their room, or it may be for an entire population, or for a disease process that's impacting an entire population, but you will be advocating for somebody, and it's important that you take on that role and that you start building the fabric of that role very early on.
I think my favorite question is probably to ask students if they can tell me about a time when they have recognized a bias, and what did they do to overcome that bias. And tell me a little bit about the situation, because we all have them, and you're going to come, face to face with them as you're working with your patients. So kind of recognizing that you have them and that you need to work on dealing with those biases as you work through your career. The other question that we ask is, we have students teach us something in 2 minutes. So I have learned a lot of amazing things in 2 minutes, and I've also learned how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in 2 minutes. So you can really find out about people's passions and what kind of diversity they have, and the passions that they're interested in by asking that question.
Great, thank you. All right, so the next question, I want to go ahead and say I'd like everybody to answer this one as well. What would you like to see changed about medical education right now? Anyone can start.
Well, I think that we're in a really unique time in healthcare in which the field is evolving rapidly and in the right way to create greater access and greater equity for everyone to get invested in their own health. And I think that medical school programs need to embrace that holistic model of care, that team-based approach to care, much more than they have done so in the past. And we've seen incremental change along those lines. We are at UCI, we're embarking on a great endeavor. We're going beyond a traditional curriculum or an integrated curriculum. We're trying to create a patient-centered curriculum where really everything we do in terms of teaching is focused back on the patient. How does this small group session, how does that lecture, how does this clinical rotation, how does that impact patient care? How does that impact your education in patient care? And at its heart, it's going to feature earlier clinical rotations. It's going to feature intersessions during the 3rd and the 4th years where those students who are embedded in those clinical rotations are going to come back, reintegrate basic science, and actually help teach the 1st and 2nd year students to create greater cohesion. And then more of those small group sessions featuring a flipped classroom format, and also featuring students from our nursing programs, our nurse practitioner programs, to learn how to work in teams effectively from the get-go. I don't think that it has all the answers, and it actually is quite a challenge to create that kind of reform. But I think it's a step in the right direction and something that I really look forward to, because the next stage after curriculum reform comes evaluation reform. You put in the curriculum, now how are we actually evaluating our students in their performance here? How are we judging them coming out to being high quality, evidence-based, highly empathic physicians? And that could yield a whole different look for medical schools across the country. Start basing your evaluations on what the students are actually doing as opposed to what their score is on an exam, and that opens the door to shorter medical school, longer medical school, specialized training, all kinds of cool things, and I'm really excited to be part of that change.
I'd love to see medical education head towards population health and see a real blending between public health and medical education. So at the University of Chicago, we actually have all of our first-year students engage in 2 classes at the same time as their first entry point to their education. That's human morphology, otherwise known as anatomy. And the other course is a health disparities course, which is in its 10th year. And as part of the health disparities course, we really want students to begin to recognize, again, their roles as advocates, but also the importance of taking on responsibility for all segments of society, so that, again, everybody counts. We try every year to one-up the year before. And so we've incorporated a lot of public health and a lot of what's relevant in the news. This year we integrated a lot of climate change and how that's going to impact vulnerable populations. We've done a lot on immigrant health, especially bringing in lawyers and social workers to discuss what's happening to the immigrant children that are coming across our borders without an adult. And so we try to bring whatever is relevant in the previous 12 months in for the first-year medical students to really grasp what's going on in a worldview, as opposed to, once again, just concentrating on what's happening within their limited healthcare system.
One of the things would be, I think we're heading towards, is more outpatient care. I mean, we're talking about everything before, but get away from the hospital, because the care of the future is definitely going to be more on an outpatient basis. So more involvement in the community, more working with community practitioners. Yes, everyone's going to have to do their time in the hospital, and their critical care, and that's just part of it, but I think more of emphasis on the outpatient setting.
I think one of the things you're hearing from all of us is that medical education is undergoing change. It's not what do we think should happen, it's what's actually happening at all our schools. We're actually doing a formal curriculum transformation, bringing more and more patient care in earlier into medical education. You're hearing that from everyone on the panel here. We already incorporate, the only school of medicine and public health in the country. Wisconsin already incorporates all the many public health concepts in our medical school education. I think all of these things, from team building to competencies, is really happening at every medical school in the country. And so wherever you're looking, the question is, at what stage are they in the evolution of their medical education?
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything that's been said on the panel. A lot of medical schools are really focusing on communication and a sort of a patient-centered curriculum where everything sort of revolves back to the patient. I think, you know, when you're thinking about medical education and where it could go, and I'm just thinking about the deficiencies, there's a lot of interaction with the medical community and the legal community, and also sort of economics that I think that are not really being focused on. So I think if you look at public policy, you know, when you go to medical school, you don't really understand or you don't really learn the new laws that are coming into effect and how that's going to sort of affect you as an upcoming physician. You also don't really, and I think we don't do this in graduate medical education as well, realize the impact of healthcare on our economy and how you make choices to sort of, you know, make medical care a little bit more efficient. So I think as we grow and as we try to tackle our fiscal debts, that this is going to be very, very important. I think this is a way that we still need to sort of grow in terms of medical education.
Okay, everybody stole my answer. So, no, and I agree. I mean, I think everyone is recognizing that the transformation is occurring as we sit here today. Our medical school within the next 1 to 2 years will be unveiling a brand new curriculum and abandoning the historical curriculum that most medical schools have been using. It's going to have a significant clinical component from the get-go, from day one, and it's going to be fully integrated into all 4 years. You know, I think medical schools are looking at different ways of delivering its curriculum and the pedagogy behind that. You know, we're looking at a lot of team-based and problem-based and learning society-based models, that all of that's going to be incorporated. There's going to be hardly any lectures at all. I think, you know, most people would agree that lectures are some of the worst way of learning, perhaps, at least in our field. I think we think that. And so it's going to be a lot more hands-on, a lot more engaging, a lot more you help me and I'm going to help you. I mean, we're all in this together mentality. So, and I think in the end, it's just, we're excited about it because I think it's just going to allow us to graduate the kind of doctors that we've always been striving to graduate and hopefully do it a lot better.
I would reiterate everything that my colleagues have said, and you know, I think we're all starting to incorporate more interprofessional education, and I think that's very important. We start that during our first week. We kick off the first week of classes for all of our medical professions with an interdisciplinary activity, and I'd like to see us incorporate more and more of that and more into rural and underserved healthcare.
Great. All right, so the next question I'll go ahead and give to Dr. Maurer. Are there any advantages or disadvantages to submitting my Amcas application before my Mcat scores are in?
Yeah, it's sort of the quandary with, I think, with all of this is, you know, everybody hears that, yes, you want to apply early. Okay, so many medical schools use a rolling-based admissions process. And so, you know, does that mean I'm going to have a better chance of an interview or so if I apply early? Maybe my MCAT, I took it in June, but I'm going to take it again here in September or something. I think, you know, my own personal opinion is I think, first of all, you got to figure out, is this my year to apply first and foremost, okay? Because ultimately, in the end, I want to see you put your best foot forward when it's your year to apply, okay? So maybe, you know, in the end, I would much rather, I guess, if it is your year, but that MCAT score is going to be a big player, I would much rather see you apply a little bit later, knowing that I've got the whole picture there, potentially, as opposed to applying early and having not the whole story there, okay? So, but I think first and foremost, you just got to make sure, is this my year, okay? It's such that when you hit enter, you have done everything you can to make sure that you are putting forward your best portfolio so that there's no questions about it and no regrets. I'll let my colleagues add to that.
You nailed it. Apply when you have the strongest application. As far as the MCAT score goes, we don't look at your application until that MCAT score comes in. So it really doesn't matter as far as that technical question. But it doesn't matter when you apply, as long as that's your strongest application you're going to be able to submit.
Submit your strongest application the earliest you can in that application cycle, because it matters your timing matters. So, you know, I hear students all the time say, well, I'm going to retake the MCAT. That first one was just for practice. No. Take the first MCAT like it's your last MCAT. And if you head up right up to the week of the MCAT and you say to yourself, oh, darn it, didn't study the way I should have, don't take it. Wait till the next one and push that application back. You want to take, I took my MCAT twice, but I honestly believed I was going to do as well the first time as I did the second time. Did much better the second time, and it didn't hurt me, right? But you honestly only want to take it when you're ready to take it. Don't take a practice, don't take 2 practices, and don't take 3.
I would agree with that for the most part, but I also think you need to weigh if you are committed to applying and you've taken the MCAT late, if you wait for the scores, that's going to add a lot more processing time, which is going to put you even later in the cycle and reduce your chances of getting an interview. So you have to kind of really think about how you feel about that test, I think, too.
Yeah, so just to clarify, in case I wasn't clear, if you take the MCAT late, don't apply. Apply the next cycle with your grade MCAT.
All right. Staying on the topic of the MCAT, this is actually a personal question of mine and probably everyone else in this room with this upcoming change. How do you think this new switch to the 2015 MCAT is going to affect evaluations for the next stream of applicants?
It's going to be difficult. But I think when you look at a AAC, you look at what's going on, there's going to be 4 different sections instead of the 3 in the writing sample, and they're all going to have sort of percentiles. So I think you can, there's an upcoming AAMC meeting that we're going to probably need some help and some advisement. But when we look at the percentiles, I think we're going to try and sort of match the percentiles. So let's say if you were at a 30 MCAT before, that was at X percentile, we'll look at the new MCAT score and see what's at that same percentile level and then sort of make the correlation. So it's a little bit statistical and mathematic, but I think that's where most of us are going to start from and then look for little blips because, the old MCAT is sort of tried and tested. So, by the bio or verbal reasoning, we think that you can communicate well, that's been studied. But with this new MCAT, we don't have any data. So the only thing that we can do is sort of correlate it to the old MCAT and then see what happens as time goes on, then that we can study it and just sort of tweak our sort of admission criteria based on that. So I think, I know NYU, that's what we're planning to do. I don't know what you guys are.
Yeah, so we're going to probably look at percentiles as well because we're going to have 3 cohorts of students. We're going to have students, because our MCATs can use up to 3 years. So we're going to have people with old MCAT, we're going to have people with just new MCAT, and then we're going to have a few people that have old and new MCAT. So I think percentages or the percentile rank is probably going to be the best bet. Of course, what are we going to do with outliers with the psychological social section? That'll be interesting to look at. So probably be sending emails to a lot of people asking what they're going to be doing.
My suspicion is that if you were to do well on the old MCAT, you're going to do well on the new MCAT. And it's probably not, I think people who study are going to do well, period. I also think that it was an important change that correlates well with the way that medical education is heading. And I also know that the AAMC and a lot of other thousands of people have put a lot of time into studying this new MCAT, and that we're just going to have to give it some time in terms of how familiar we become with it.
All right. Thank you so much. So it's now halfway. It's 3:30. So if the audience members would like to come up and start asking questions.
This question is for, I guess, the whole panel. Do you guys think it's a drawback for an applicant to take the MCAT 3 times?
I'd say that it's not a drawback if you're building on something. We have some of our strongest physicians coming from backgrounds where test taking was not their emphasis, and they do other things incredibly well. And that's actually usually reflected sometimes in that early application we see. But it does take some time to get to a point where you're comfortable with the exam, and we've seen some people do remarkable turnarounds over a course of exams, which, granted, I think if you have the choice to take MCAT once or 3 times, the choice you will take is clear. If you're blessed to take it one time and it's a great score, go for it. I think we've emphasized that, put that best application forward. But when we're looking at students who come, everybody comes with some kind of challenge, and if you're able to overcome that challenge in a significant way, it's a story in of itself. You have your essays, you have your secondaries, you have your interviews to tell your story. Sometimes even those numbers tell something of a story too. And so I would certainly, if you're on the right track and if you're making those improvements, that can be quite a compelling case in itself that you are ready to enter medical school and be a valuable member of the medical profession.
So unless something dramatic has changed, you suddenly realize that you weren't studying the right way, you had a migraine the first time you took it, and this time you're not hopefully going to have one. Unless something dramatic has changed, I haven't seen students change their numbers dramatically. So if you're studying the exact same way that you did the first 2 times, unless something has significantly changed, taking it a 3rd time may not be a great thing to do, especially if your scores, once again, don't change.
I 100% agree. So taking it once is better than taking it twice, is better than taking it 3 times. And so just remember, if you're taking the MCAT several times, there's going to be a question when you come to interview, and you have to be prepared to sort of discuss, why did you take the MCAT 5 times? And on the 5th time, you did very well. Is that really just by chance, or are you more like the 4 times? So you have to already have codified your story or the reasons that you took the MCAT multiple times. If it's a migraine or a different sort of study pattern, just be prepared to say that. Because again, there's no cutoff. You can take the MCAT as many times as you want, but know that it's diminishing returns. The more you take it, the more questions an admissions committee is going to have.
The AMC analysis shows that if you take the MCAT twice, let's say you get a 20 the first time and the 30 the second time, then in medical school you're going to perform most like someone who took it once and got a 25. And so many of our committee members will average multiple scores. And that's why when we say take it 1 time and do well, it's really to your advantage to do that. Having said that, our committee does view the MCAT holistically like we view everything. And there can be valid reasons you didn't do well the first time. You hadn't taken the right prerequisite. You were sick that day, whatever. So that's taken into consideration. That doesn't mean we should average everyone's scores. But that's what's coming out of the AAMC, so taking it more than once is to your disadvantage. You're hearing the same thing from all of us. Take it once and do well.
I also think you have to take into account your life, right? It takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to study for these MCATs, and it's also expensive. There are better things to do with your time than try to increase your MCAT by a point or two. Don't forget the rest of your life.
My question would also be to the entire panel regarding the new MCAT. As was said before, that it would be a learning experience for both the admissions officers and the students. Do you believe that the first round of incoming MCATs, the 2015 one, would either have be a bit too stringently graded or too loosely? For instance, because of the new scoring system that everyone's going to be adjusting to.
I think that's beyond our purview. I think it's really up to the people at AAMC. They're the ones who are doing the statistics. So.
But I can say to reassure you somewhat is that it's going to be on the same curve, right? So from your original MCAT, what actually makes it a 13 or a 14 or a 12 is a certain percentage and it's a certain distribution. So with the new MCAT, it's going to have that same distribution. So I don't think you have to worry about you're taking a new MCAT and this is going to be graded either easier or harder because it's sort of on the same distribution. So, this is going to be statistics and math and distribution. So I think you should rest assured that when you take it, there's going to be no sort of bias.
And everyone else is in the same boat with you.
I would just say worry less about the MCAT, whether it's the current or the MCAT 2015. Think about your entire application. Just even the amount of time we're spending discussing the MCAT here is in disproportion to how we're going to view it in your application.
Anybody else?
This is for Dr. Roswell. Was there anything that you use before you actually, or in order for you to prepare for the MCAT, like a prep book or anything like that you guys use before actually taking the MCAT?
So I think this is a question that all of us can answer because we most all have taken the MCATs. But I think it is really important, and I think we're stressing it, it's really important that you do very well on the MCAT. So anything that you have in your armamentarium or you have access to, so a prep course will be definitely advisable. I can tell you right now, I'm researching for internal medicine, and so we have to know basically 50,000 facts from sort of 100,000 pages of information. And you pay the $2,000 and they distill it to, you don't have to know 50,000, but you kind of have to know these 5,000, and you're gonna get 200 questions on that. That's a great, great, great help. So if you have access in it and you can take a prep course, I think that'll be advisable. So you're comfortable, you know what to expect, and you can perform the best on your MCAT. Because remember, you have your MCAT and your GPA, and then and we get to know you. So there's only a couple of things. So
I think how you study for the MCAT very much depends on what kind of learner you are. So if you do well in a social setting, in a room where other people are asking questions along with you, then a prep course is fabulous. If you do better in your room, in your special setting, with your special coffee mug at your table, then study alone with your books. I'm also recertifying this year, and I know exactly, this is my second time though, I think you're too young for me. I know exactly what prep materials I'm gonna use. I'm gonna use med study, which is what I did my first recertification, and it went well, so I know they work for me. It's in the language that I like, and I know how I'm gonna prepare in the few months to come.
I was just going to add one thing. I think one of the things that we hear, though, from a lot of our applicants, especially applicants from disadvantaged backgrounds, is that the cost of this prep work and the coursework is really hideous. And I've looked into it, and they're right. It can be really prohibitive for some people and puts some candidates at a definite disadvantage just because they don't have the financial means or their own schools being able to help them out in that sort of way. So I think anytime that I got the opportunity to plug something that I think is going to be a good way to prep that is free, I want to take that chance and do that right now. So I know that the AAMC has partnered with another entity called the Khan Academy, Khan, and they are putting out a lot of sort of videos, vignettes on all the different topics that are being covered in the new 2015 MCAT, and it is totally free. And so again, it's not the same as taking an exam, but if it is an organized, thoughtful way to try to help people of a younger generation that uses stimuli from the internet and an electronic manner to learn and to review. And so I just want to take a moment to just plug that because it is free. I've looked at some of the videos. I think it was one of those things I said, oh yeah, I remember learning that 27 years ago. So, yeah, I would definitely plug that as well for people with whom that is a strong issue.
I'm also going to add that regardless of what kind of learner you are, take those practice tests. Take them over and over and over again, and pay attention to your score. Don't just take them and toss them. Look at the score, because often I will be helping undergrads and they'll say, I'm consistently scoring a 26, but I think I'm going to get a 28 on the actual MCAT. Whatever you're getting on the practice exams, subtract 2. That's how you know what you're going to get on the MCAT, and take them over and over again because it really does help set you up for that day.
Switching topics a little bit. Can you each talk about some of the community outreach opportunities available for medical students at your schools?
Sure. I'll go ahead and I'll start. At our medical school, we've got, well, this question actually lends to who we are at Michigan State. We were one of the, or we like to actually lay claim to being the very first community-based medical school in the country. We fight over that title with our good friends over at Penn State, who also like to make that claim. But from our inception 50 years ago, we started educating our students out in the communities, away from large referral-based tertiary care medical centers. At my medical school, we don't own our own hospital. There isn't the Michigan State hospital in Lansing or in Grand Rapids. We partner effectively with the communities in our state and have very healthy relationships with those medical communities that allow us to put our students in those clinical scenarios, in the time when the clinical learning is appropriate for them, and they're put on the front line where medicine is happening throughout the state. So our students, they may learn their critical basic sciences either in Lansing, or I'm sorry, the East Lansing or Grand Rapids campuses, but the significant amount of their clinical experiences are going to be in one of 6 clinical communities across the state that also include some significant rural areas. So one of the things that that's really important to us is we've got some special programming and clinical tracks for students who have a strong affinity to wanting to provide care to medically underserved communities in rural environments. The other specialized clinical track that we have is called the Leadership in Medicine for the Underserved, and our Flint community is the home base for that, and it uses much more of an urban-based inner city model for those individuals that want to provide underserved medicine in that type of environment. It also has sort of its historical roots in underserved international healthcare as well. So for the students that are a part of that clinical track, they get to spend 8 weeks in a medically underserved developing country, either in Central America, South America, or Africa, as part of their learning experience. So essentially from our inception, we've been a school that has always integrated their students out into the communities for primary learning out on the front line.
So I'll try to answer pretty quickly so we get to some more questions. So at NYU, we're lucky and fortunate enough to have Bellevue Hospital, which I think is sort of the public hospital of the world. You know, it might be a little bit megalomaniacal here, but a lot of people in New York City, you know, if they even are underserved or they come from the airport, come to Bellevue Hospital. So Bellevue Hospital at NYU has a very, very long history of treating the underserved, the indigent populations. You know, we also have primary, home-based primary care where we sort of go out into the community of our diverse population and sort of see patients there as well. I'm a cardiologist, and heart transplantation has been an issue in the underserved community, also in immigrant communities. So you have an illegal alien who supposedly does not have the right to sort of get a heart transplant, but can donate one. And so what we've done at NYU and Bellevue Hospital, we formed a coalition and actually got some patients who were not documented heart transplants at NYU. So I think, you know, NYU and Bellevue Hospital and sort of community outreach is sort of our bread and butter.
I think the biggest thing students find is a lack of time to do all the community projects that they want to be doing. Certainly, starting the first year of medical school, we have our student-run medical clinics that our faculty certainly help with. They also go into the public school systems, providing education there. Our Triumph program, as far as being part of our curriculum, is extraordinarily popular. That's our urban medicine program. Students have to apply to that when they start their clinical training, but it's so popular they actually have to apply and get accepted, and they do their training in Milwaukee. As part of that, they will do a community health or public health project and do most of their clinical training, as I said, in those Milwaukee sites. So I think you're seeing it at every school here is going to have both volunteer times that students are involved in the community, plus they're going to be parts of the curriculum the students' interest in that field can work in.
So one of the more interesting things I found about student-run clinics, and a lot of places have student-run clinics, is that yes, we send medical students into the wards almost first or second week. But when you're working at a student-run clinic, at least at Wake Forest, you're working with a variety of different attendings that you may or may not see until your third year. A lot of one-on-one attention, because usually there's like sometimes there's more medical students than patients sometimes. But what really struck me when I went to go visit is they have really a lot of contact with various attendings. So that's one advantage of being involved into early community service.
I'm going to split my answer in two because I wasn't sure which of these two you were asking. We are a tertiary care center located on the south side of Chicago. We have an affiliation with a community hospital that's up further north, and then another hospital that's more of a primary care hospital, and our students rotate through all three. We are located in one of the wealthiest communities in Chicago, but surrounded by 8 of the 10 poorest service communities in Chicago. And we feel that gives us both an opportunity as well as a responsibility to teach our students about caring for the underserved. Our students, aside from everything the hospital does and going out into the community, are extremely service-oriented. We have 4 student-run free clinics. We have education programs extending into public schools on nutrition, on science, on well-being and behaviors. But I will tell you that because our students are so service-oriented, they changed the fabric of admissions as well. So that if you are a student applying to Pritzker, we actually won't look at your application unless you have service on your application, because it's very likely that Pritzker will not be a good fit for you if you're not service-oriented, because our students are.
So just to try to provide a little bit of an overview as we get to the end of the table, I think that at any institution, you can get involved with as many community-related, volunteer, or required activities that will more than fill your time. And I think you want to look for a school that, one, provides opportunities for growth. So if you find a new lead, that you can follow it. 2, I think you also want one that it's really integrated and embedded in the regular curriculum, because it's great to do it on volunteer on your own time, but there's something more to be gathered, I think, from working directly in a community. You go to a clinic and you go to a hospital, you've seen one clinic and one hospital. Rotating through different sites with different patient populations and different locations, there's something highly valuable just in terms of getting that experience and learning those different systems. But also, I think, in terms of I think this group of young clinicians out there, you are going to have to really be ready for change during your careers. Learning how to adapt and find your best niche and find your own personal best practice in different settings is a hidden skill that we really want to emphasize, I think, in the next generation of medical students more than any other. And so I think that the future is bright for you in community medicine.
Part of our mission is to put people back into rural and underserved areas of healthcare, so we focus a lot on that and start with health fairs and health clinics in the communities around us. We have a student health center that's run by our students across the health professions. We have a medical missions track. If you're not in the medical missions track, you still have a lot of opportunities to go on missions trips, and that's around the world and right there in North Carolina, because there are plenty of, most of eastern North Carolina is rural and underserved.
Thank you. All right, you can ask the next question.
All right, my question ties in with what has been asked already, and if we do community work, what is the chance, or do you have anything at your prospective schools in terms of supervised mentorship program that can help us develop a certain idea? And if not, does the culture allow for certain ideas to be like, can we come up and try to get to work something out where we could probably develop some sort of a thesis or something? How much innovation is involved with your prospective schools?
Well, I would comment on the mentoring. I think when you get into professional school, mentoring becomes much more important than it is to even you as undergrads now, where most of you probably have mentors to get you to this stage of your career. We have formal mentoring that happens. We use a learning community system where there are mentors for every student has a mentor. What's really more important is our ability to connect you to the informal mentors that really help you develop the career you want to go into. And so really it's during that first and second year you're meeting the people that are going to change your lives. They're going to help you find the specialty you want to go into. They may be in that specialty. That are going to help you develop the credentials to get into that specialty if that's what you want to do. So I think one of the things that we really stand out for, I think, is both our formal and informal mentoring, because it's so important in your professional development.
We actually have a track system, a scholarship system that allows you to kind of pick your thesis or your theme for your medical education training. And you can pick global health, community health, quality. There are a number of different tracks, and you will proceed along those tracks with additional training in that particular track. It gives you the opportunity to get additional advising as well as to establish mentorship relationships. And there's a big difference between advising and mentorship, right? And so our goal is for you to meet that mentor and move forward. So there's a lot of, it's called scholarship and discovery. So there's a lot of opportunity both to develop new innovative educational programs, new research, or service that is well thought out and well delivered. So even when we're doing service, because we're very research-based, we want to make sure you've done a needs assessment, that you're delivering the right service to the right group of people, and that you have a way of assessing whether that service has been impactful, and that you thought about how to sustain it financially.
So personally, I do a lot of school-based health programs, and that's a big part of my practice now. And a couple of years ago, I was scoping out a new potential site for a school clinic, and I ran into one of our medical students in the hallway of this middle school. I'm like, what are you doing here? I've been coming here for the last year and a half. I do health education and mentoring for this. Like, okay, maybe we should know that and connect a little bit. So That and a lot of other experiences have led to a leadership group within our medical education department where we come together on a regular basis, and it's an incubator for ideas about community service and cultural awareness. And so what we try to do is take some of the best ideas, I'd say about 80% of them are coming from students themselves, and see what works, see if we can integrate them into current models that we're using, and make them sustainable. That's the key, because it's incredibly disappointing, as you can imagine, for a middle school, and when you have a relationship with the administration, the teachers, and particularly the students, and then that student graduates or goes into a difficult fourth year, and where they're applying for residency, and then it all goes dark. So we really want to make a more permanent and lasting change, and certainly use the energy of our students to really feed that mechanism.
Great.
So my question is a little bit more like logistical. I was just wondering, like, when you guys have a bunch of people apply from different schools that have different rankings, and the GPA kind of fluctuates, how are you able to compare these students? Like, do you guys use the Mcat strictly for comparing people across the board, or is there just kind of an understanding, or just
Yeah, so I think almost every admissions committee has that person that's been on the committee for 20 or 30 years. And we have relationships with these schools. We understand that some of the schools have grade inflation and some of them have grade deflation. And so we understand what a 3.5 is compared to a 4.0 from one school to another. We get it.
I'll just add to, I think, and probably most of us in our individual institutions have an idea of what sort of academic metrics are required in order to be successful in our own particular medical curricular programs. And so, so then I think it's just an issue on the individual school basis, at and above and beyond that, how much are you going to emphasize that in the decision-making process? So.
And then I do agree that if the admission committee does not know the school, then the Mcat does play a more of a role if you come from a school that no one on the committee knows. But it's very important that you guys do really well in your GPA, because it's great that you can sit down and take a test and do really well, but we really want to see how have you been doing throughout the 4 years of your schooling. Because if you could sit down once and take a test, that's good. But really, has there been an upward trend? Has it been stably outstanding throughout your 4 years? And that carries a lot of weight. And I just want to emphasize that. We're talking about MCAT. It's a very important test. And we all want you to do very well. But make sure that your GPA and your academic record is stably excellent. They'll take you guys far.
I have to agree with that. But there's... you don't get as much information from one MCAT as you do from a GPA trajectory. What kind of coursework are you taking? If you're still taking, physics for the ballerina in your 4th year, we notice. We're looking for harder and harder course levels, either a very stable GPA, or a rising GPA, because your patients are not going to care if you're having an off day or an off semester. You need to be consistent, and consistency is really what we're tracking.
There's some really good ballerina physicists, by the way.
All right, last question from the audience.
Hi, my name is Saravia, and I'm a 3rd year from UC Berkeley. And my question has to do with the entire application process and how you view research experience and clinical experience in comparison to your GPA and MCAT, and if you prefer research or clinical depending on the school.
I'm going to be really brief, I think, and just say that a lot of the applications I see coming particularly to the program of medical education for the Latino community, are so wonderful in terms of background and service and the volunteership and often research. but what's lacking is GPA and MCAT. So we spend a lot of time trying to work with those students to really increase those variables in their application, because I think what you'll hear is the whole package is important, and we really look at things holistically, and it's true. There's no single formula, but that's what personally I see, and it's something that we really struggle with and really try to join with the students in addressing. So even if this application cycle isn't successful, if they've got the right stuff and they're really committed, we can find that best time, And I guess I'd say that I don't want people to apply again and again in futility. I've definitely had some hard conversations about that too. That's one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do is tell a student maybe it's time to think about something else, because it has been 5, 7 years. I've had 9 years. But that said, I really want to give those students who have that dream and really believe in it every chance you can get, and that's been my experience.
I think that Mcats and Gpas are important because they give us some insight into how dogged you are and how resilient you are and how much you want this and how long you've been dedicated to this. I think it is important to engage in research, because even if you never do research, as a physician, there are always innovations. You're going to have to assess the medical research and decide whether this is something you want to apply to your patients or not, or is valuable for your patients or not. But the clinical shadowing and the service are crucial as far as I'm concerned, because you need to know when you step up to bat that you're going to swing. So if you're coming to medical school, you're coming to it because you are 100% dedicated to this, right? And if I don't see evidence in your application that you like being with sick people, if I don't see evidence in your application that this is what you're dedicated to, it's really hard to bring you into medical school and have you leave in the first couple of years, because you realize you don't like touching people and you don't want to talk to somebody who's dying. So these are as important for you to know as it is for us to know that this is what you want to do. You want to be the kind of physician that we have to drag out of the hospital kicking and screaming when it's time to retire, because that's what most of us do. We don't want to stop because that's how much we love it. And so we want to know that when you apply, it's because you're going to go for it.
I think it's important to remember in whatever category you're talking about that there's a minimum you have to achieve. You have to have enough academic background that you can achieve in medical school. You have to know that you want to be a physician. But I think another way to view these things is, what is it that makes you outstanding? What is it that when a reviewer looks at your application, they say, she's going to be a great doctor? Is it because of your service? Is it because of your research? Is it because of your empathy? Is it because of your interest in whatever? And that's, I think, something that's often forgotten when you start talking about this piece of the application, that piece of the application. What is it that really makes a unique, outstanding application? Because all of our schools are getting thousands of applications per year, and many of them are academically well prepared, and many of them have done good shadowing. What is it that makes you special and unique? And that's probably, I think, the most important part of the application that people often forget.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. It's not just one thing. It's not a checklist. You have to check everything and then, bingo, you're in. I see a lot of that, and some people on my admissions committee also think that way, unfortunately. One of the things that someone asked me the other day is, like, if you had 2 applicants that are exactly the same and then this variable changed, what would happen? I was like, I hate that question. Even if we get 8,000 applications, no one is exactly the same. Everybody's different. They have great researchers. We have great people who've done tremendous community service. We have people with tremendous academics. It's just what brings you to medicine and what is your passion for medicine. It's a complete package, and everyone really is different.
We really do use a holistic process, but the clinical side would be a little more important to us because we want to put people back into those rural and underserved areas. But we would look at the research and see, that you've taken the time to do that and those kind of things, but we're going to look more at your clinical experiences. So I think a lot of it, too, is finding the right match for you. There are other schools that are going to be more focused on the research than what we are, for certain. So finding the right school that matches for you.
So I 100% agree. Like we talked about before, when you're interviewing at certain schools, you would ask, you know, the interviewer might ask you, why are you here? You need to ask yourself the same question. Is this school a good fit for me for that same reason? Because at NYU, we want the well-balanced, well-rounded clinician, but we place a significant amount of impact on research experience. And we want to train sort of physician scientists who are really clinically and culturally competent, but to sort of be physician scientists and sort of leaders in the field. So if you feel that that's not the actual fit for you, then, you know, certain medical schools are not the fit for you. And it's a shame, because I don't think as medical schools we actually broadcast this well enough or educate you guys well enough that we're looking for sort of a physician scientist, or we're looking for sort of a clinical sort of a physician to sort of go in underserved communities, et cetera. We sort of, I think, just markedly and just say that we're looking for great doctors. And I think that's what confuses you. But I think on admissions committee, there are little things in different admissions committee they look at, whether it's research, whether it's service. They really strike a chord with certain admissions committee and certain people on the admissions committee, and that really aligns with the mission of the medical school to which you're applying.
All right. Is anyone dying to ask a question? We have room for one more. Anybody? Sure.
I'll go ahead and start since I didn't answer the last one by choice. So, I think the answer is it depends. Okay, and by that I mean, do you have a reapplicant who is just submitting the same application again, over and over again? Or is there evidence that that applicant has started to ask the question, well, why is this not happening for me? Why are they not choosing me? And doing some really honest self-reflection. Maybe they've even reached out to my medical school and said, hey, I've applied to you guys twice now. I didn't get any bites. Is it possible that you could give me some feedback? Now, I realize not all medical schools are willing to do that. Some are, though. And so I think, you know, for those of you in the audience, if you are reapplicants, I would say don't ever hesitate in at least reaching out to the medical schools that you've applied to say, you know, is it possible for me to just get some feedback? And then upon your own self-reflection, applying that feedback, that improvement then shows in your application the next time around. And gosh, maybe you got an interview this time, because what it tells us is that you're someone who's willing to receive feedback and constructive feedback and apply it to yourself. And we think that that's worth something. And so I think if you're someone that's a reapplicant that's done a lot of self-reflecting and you've done a lot of work to try to improve the application that you thought was really great the first time around, and now it's even more awesome, I think that speaks loudly. But I think for the candidate who just, you know, didn't get the interview, they, you know, said, okay, well, I'll give it a try again the next cycle, and it's the same application, you know, that's probably not going to get you too far with most admissions committees.
I would have two quick thoughts. One is we looked at this a year ago in our student database, and 18% of our successful applicants are reapplicants. So a very significant portion of people coming into our class this year and last year are people who are applying more than once. The second thing I would tell every reapplicant is wait long enough before you reapply so that your application is improved. Many people reapplying are on alternate lists. They find out in May they're not getting in anywhere, and in June they're resubmitting that same application. People almost always need to take a year off to improve their application so that they will be successful when they apply. Remember, the goal when you reapply is not to get accepted to one medical school, is to have your choice of medical schools. That's the level people should be shooting for.
All right, that's all the time we have. Please join me in giving them a round of applause. Thank you so much for being here.